It's time to plant onions if you live in a mild winter climate. If you don't, you can use the same information in the spring after your last frost date. Let me know in the comments if you've grown onions before and if you were successful or not so successful. I've had plenty of failures, which I'll get to in a minute, but in order to grow onions successfully, you have to know how they grow and why they grow that way. Last year, my onion harvest was massive. The onions themselves were massive. This is just one example. Biggest, juiciest onions I've ever grown. But it wasn't always that way. For years, more years than I would care to admit, my onion harvest looked like this. I could never figure out why. It was failure after failure. And then I realized certain onions grow in certain places. I was growing the wrong onion for where I live in the world. Onions are photothermoperiodic, which means they are very sensitive to the daylight hours and the temperature in which they grow. So in the beginning of its life cycle, an onion seedling will put up a lot of greenery, and they will grow only greenery until the day length reaches a specific amount of hours. And that signals the onion to stop leaf production and to start bulb production, which is what you want unless you're growing green onions, and then it doesn't matter. So my problem and why I was getting those puny little onions is I was growing the wrong type of onion. The onions I was growing were waiting for long days to switch from putting up leaves to starting work on growing the bulb. More daylight hours than I was ever going to have possible here. So different onions have different requirements for how many daylight hours they need. There's long day onions, short day onions, and intermediate day onions. The further north you go from the equator, now we're talking the United States at this point, but the latitudes are the same all the way around the world. And of course, in the southern hemisphere, the more south you go, the longer the day. So in the north of the United States, you're gonna grow long day onions because your day length in the spring and summer are longer days than in the south. And if you're in the middle part, those are intermediate day. And if you're in the south, those would be short day onions. So I was growing the long day onions when I should have been growing short day onions. And onions should be labeled when you buy them, long, short, or intermediate day. Look at the tag. If it doesn't say, go to a different nursery, or you'll have to order seeds online. When I go to most of my nurseries around here, all they say is brown onion, red onion, white onion, and that's it. To make things worse, I have seen long day onions for sale at our garden centers in a short day climate. So you have to do your due diligence yourself. There's a few different ways to grow onions. You can grow them from seed, you can grow them from transplants, or you can grow them from sets. Seeds are pretty self-explanatory. Transplants are just seeds that were sprouted for you already. And sets are bulbs that are grown from the previous year to a small size. Sets have never worked for me. Let me know in the comments if they've ever worked for you, if you've gotten any type of large bulbing onion by planting a set. So I prefer to grow from seed or transplant. So let's first start with seed. I like growing from seed because you get way more choices in terms of variety, and you can be sure you're getting the right day length onion for your area. So let's start with seeds. Super easy. Take some pre-moistened potting soil and fill a 6-pack with it. Sprinkle in your seeds. You can put a lot in each cell. Barely cover them with more potting soil. Keep them moist and in part shade until germination, and then move them to full sun. In a few weeks, they will look like this. Now, I prefer to sow in advance in a container like this because then I know every place I plant one of these, there's going to be a bulb that will grow. If I plant seed in the ground, if there's any problem with germination, I'm going to have a blank spot with no onion. Now, you can buy a container of onion starts like this from the garden center. Buying 6-pack containers of certain plants don't make a lot of financial sense to me. A 6-pack of lettuce or a 6-pack of cabbage, you're paying almost $1 per plant. However, a 6-pack of onions, there might be 100 or more onions in here for $4 to $6. That makes sense to me. I'm planting Texas Grano or Texas Early Grano again this year. I had such a great harvest last year. Why mess with a good thing? Now, for starters, onions like full sun, 6 to 8 hours of direct sunlight. They like rich, well-draining soil, and they also like a consistently damp root run. We had a very wet winter last year, and I think that has a lot to do with the size of my harvest. Now, I'm going to show you how to plant onions in containers and raised beds or the ground, but moisture content in containers is much harder to manage than in the ground or in raised beds. So you have to stay on top of that if you're going to grow your onions in a container. My personal preference is drip irrigation, so you don't even have to think about it. Here in this container, I'm going to add some nutrients. This is Neptune's Harvest crab and lobster and kelp meal. And I'm going to ensure good watering when rains aren't adequate by spiraling this drip tube a couple of times around. To separate the starts, because there's a lot in each one of these cells, swish them around in water to wash off the soil and then gently tease them apart. But again, these are tough little plants, so you don't have to really worry about being too gentle with them. And I'm going to plant each onion right by a drip emitter. As far as depth, plant about half of the white section. You want to space your onions about 10 to 12 inches apart, and you want to know that onions will be in place from now through July, up to 9 months. So you can sow lettuce seeds around them for the first few months to make the most of the space. Lastly, mulch your container to help keep the moisture in the soil. I'm just using pine shavings. Now to plant in ground or raised beds, the same idea. I'm going to dig a small trench down the length of the bed directly under a drip tube, mix in some fertilizer, place the onion plants directly under the emitters, add the mulch, and when you add the mulch, make sure the onions are standing as straight up as you can get them. They will work themselves out, but they really grow better if they grow straight up from the soil and don't have to make any kind of turns. If you're sowing seed instead of transplants, you don't even have to worry about it. The seed will find its way up and through that mulch and grow straight. If you didn't get a chance to see my huge harvest, check out this video right here. It's going to show you what to do at harvest, how to know when to harvest, and how to store them to make sure they last as long as possible. I'll see you guys next time.